little bit about me. I'm a self-taught product designer. What that means for me is I've learned a lot and documented everything I've learned throughout my journey. I started out as a research-based designer in a HCI lab at college, and then from there I kind of went to the industry, as they say, and research and worked at a bunch of consumer products like Mint, OkCupid, Meetup, and most recently I'm at Etsy. I'm also a side entrepreneur, but currently just focusing on writing this book. I think I'm having some video issues, so I might have to turn it off. You can hear me. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Mind confirming in chat that y'all can still hear me? Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Got all of these weird internet notices. Anyway, so this talk mostly going to focus on kind of like a 101 of product design interviewing. Everything from applying for it, what that interview loop looks like, because a lot of people don't really know what to expect. I definitely didn't. A design challenge is something a lot of product designers who are starting out will run into, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Just to kind of share an overview of where this information is coming from, I've spent a lot of time interviewing and working at these companies, landing offers at them. And so here's like a little bit of a preview of the companies I've interviewed at and gotten offers from. And I was documenting my process, like I said, throughout. And this is kind of me summarizing all of it. And with that, we'll get started with applying. So I think the first and maybe the most important thing you will work on is your resume. And there's a lot of advice on the internet about how to write your resume and what to include and what not to include. And here are some of the things that I've learned that are super important that you may not have heard in your standard workshops is you really don't have to share everything. You can present the narrative you want the hiring team to see. Not all the information is required. Some of it is almost creepy, like why do they need to know where you live? Whereas sometimes things like graduation year can be held against you because of age. You don't have to share every single job you've had. Just summarize and keep you've done so the hiring manager can really see who you are and the skills you have without it feeling too onerous to kind of decipher all of the jargon. It's also important to not over-design your resume, kind of like keep it, just have a few basic things that are important, which is like your current or past experience, how long you've been there. A link is super important. As a designer, you're always going to need, we'll talk about it shortly, but as a designer, maybe the most important thing in your resume is that link the reviewer can click. And the last thing is a little bit of a self-summary. And here's an narrative you want to just summarize experiences. Like I know bullets are kind of the industry standard, but when I tried something different where I summarized it very quickly in like a normal human readable paragraph, and it seemed to work really well. On the other side, when I do hiring, I also try to keep an eye out for people who are either overloading their resume with jargon and bullet points that are kind of saying the same thing as opposed to being in their job. And so it goes both ways, as there are people on the other side reading your resume too, and the more you talk to them, the better shot you have. Speaking of over-designed resumes, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen these, and it just is insane, like having to tilt my head or zoom in. Understand, like I would much rather prefer an under-designed resume than an over-designed one. But since we are designers, I would recommend designing it a little bit, kind of establishing your own personal brand, and then you can have it kind of continue into and anything else you have on the internet. So here are a few examples of resumes that are what I like to call just right, and these are taken from Canva. again, like your name, your portfolio link, super important. You don't have to have all of your experience. You can summarize some of it. Mine's here, mine's on the website, on my website. So if you ever feel like you want to take a look, feel free. And here are some of the like the best resumes I've seen, and I've obviously taken their permission, but these are real resumes that perform really well. Your portfolio. It's really important to balance the time investment that you will put into it, because I know it's fun and nice to build a pretty portfolio that's like custom built with all of these animations, but honestly, as a designer and as a reviewer of these portfolios, I would much rather you spend time on your case study and easily, because they're changing often and it should be easy for you to maintain recency over any of those gimmicks. You also, as someone who's starting out, want to blend in a little. So something that's too out there can send the signal that you're trying too hard or trying to stand out too much. And maybe just like take a look at a few portfolios of designers at your level who are working where you want to work, and like kind of go off of that to make sure you're not. And then, like I said, if you're not proficient in web dev, just like use what designers do, Squarespace, Webflow, like whatever templates. It doesn't matter as long as it's not like super hideous. Your resume's brand can start kind of bleeding into your portfolio site, but you don't need to spend a lot of time on it. So, are these must-haves? You always have in your portfolio, have at least 2 case studies, and these can be recent work, side projects, but make sure you call out which one it is. A little bit about you, and like I said, or identity. And then the next thing is for the case studies itself. Picking projects is so important. Try to include a variety of different projects. So you want to span across recency and skill set. So if you have 5 visual design projects, that may not be as good as having just like 2 projects, but one is visual design and one is interaction design focused. If you get a bunch of tiny things, try to combine it project on your portfolio, just because it's easier for the reviewer to look at like your auxiliary skill sets in one place. And the last thing, and this is really important for those starting out, is just state the case and not professional experience. It's okay, you don't have to pass it off as. It's almost harder for the reviewer to judge you when it was actually a side project, because in side projects you're making a lot of assumptions, and it's even more important for the reviewer to understand that you're better at making those assumptions and working off of them than think those are real constraints. And then last one is something that I've noticed is a lot of students graduating from boot camps or design programs and having the same project. So I'll see like 4 or 5 candidates all having the same project, and everyone says they were the designer. And so it's really important for those to outline your role and involvement, because your other classmates are probably applying to the same roles. And just a quick overview on like what that case study should look like. Definitely have these 8 things, but having high fidelity screens and prototypes. Like I said, making sure your role as a designer is clearly articulated, even if it means saying you work with multiple designers and how those roles were broken out. And always preface your problem with prior research that was backing it up, or if you didn't do the research yourself. One of the things in that the list of studies process. Here's my 2 cents on it. Avoid using standard visuals like the double diamond, or because they're rarely used as is. evaluated on their ability to adapt that like generic process to a problem you're working on. And so here are examples from my portfolio of like process, like me visualizing the process I use, and it's almost more effective that way. And we'll kind of switch gears. So once you've applied your portfolio applied and you start getting interviews, here's a quick overview of what to expect. So the first thing you'll expect is an interview screen, and the recruiter 15 minutes just to kind of match you to that job description that you applied for. And this is done a couple different ways. Sometimes you'll have a conversation with a designer before doing a design challenge, or the other way around. You'll see that the challenge is not part of the loop at all. And once you pass that initial stage, you'll have almost always a 45-minute to 1 hour portfolio presentation where you'll share some past work. Popular these app critique rounds where you and product and critique it. And again, part of interview loops where you and your interview, it's a product specific problem or more generic, like design an alarm clock kind of thing. And then you'll have a bunch of what they call cross-functional interviews. So talking with product managers, UX researchers, other designers. The thing I want to focus on here is design challenges. For my advice, and I've done this before, is for senior roles, doing them or put them off for a later step. It really, honestly, is free work, especially if it's a company-specific prompt. That's a red flag for you as an interviewer, as an interviewee, because either they've already solved that problem and are looking for you to have the same answer as them. And, you know, as a designer, there's always multiple solutions, but their bias will be towards the answer they have. And worse is if they haven't solved the problem and they end up using your work. And so even if you're not, and I understand a lot of folks just want to get that job and are willing to do it. Even if you do, try to ask for compensation or put it off for a later step. I have an email template I've used in the past that's worked, is like, you know, I'm excited about the role just as much. I want to make sure this is a fit on both sides before kind of spending all of this time and energy. And also trying to ask for a challenge that's not generic to every candidate, but if they see specific skill gaps, they can ask for a design challenge to see that exact skill. And if you do end up doing the design challenge, it's really challenging, but I would say time box it. A lot of companies say, oh yeah, you have to spend like 4 or 5 hours, but honestly, it will take you like a day's worth of work, but still try to be really strict about how much time you spend on it. The other thing is, don't just go off solving it until you've asked a lot of clarifying questions and set expectations for what they're expecting, whether it's a deck, whether it's designs, high fidelity, low fidelity. Ask them what they're expecting and just work off of that. It's also a good idea to ask, like, does the team feel like I need to exhibit more interaction skills or visual skills, and let the recruiter or the design manager know that you're going to be showcasing those skills in the project time. And the last thing is, if you find yourself stuck, just like adjust fidelity, keep going, make a it's totally fine. And here's a quick suggested format of presenting that design challenge. Some companies will have you present it in a presentation, I'll have you send it over, but the few things I'll really define that problem space, whether it's from those clarifying questions or the assumptions you've made. Kind of try to go a little broad with like lower mid fidelity so they can see you're able to diverge, and always have next steps for what you would do, because this was an 8 to 10 hour project. No real project is like that. And so try to say what you will do next for it and reflect a little bit. And that's pretty much it. So I have written step-by-step guides for a few interviews and offers that I've landed. I'm adding them as we go, but I would be remiss if I didn't share. And the waitlist is open. I hope to have it up by sometime late this year, but I kind of want to open it up to questions for y'all at this point. And you can ask questions in the chat and I'll pick them. Okay, I'm seeing this question from Lily. Hold on, let me just read it. So that's a really good question. What I like to do is ask them beforehand what they would prefer. I personally prefer questions at the end just because it like kind of throws you off. But usually when I start out, I will just ask them, like, do you want to ask questions as we go or towards the end of each project or presentation or the entire presentation? And if they ask you for your preference, feel free to share it. But definitely ask the question. Or you can, if you want to be more assertive, you can say, hey, you know, we have like a jam-packed schedule with how many ever projects are presenting, and I'll pause between each project for questions. Seeing another question. Hope that answered it for you, Lily. Awesome. The other question I'm seeing is, do you have recommendations on how someone who is new to designing can get started? Well, yes, because that's how I got started. I did a lot of side projects, and the side projects I did, I was very clear to call out that here's a side project, it's live in the world, or it's just like a design prototype. Getting a lot of feedback is really important. Whether you do it through design mentors that you find, and there's a lot of websites that do have designers who are willing to spend one-on-one time. I've done my fair share of it, and it's really rewarding. Just kind of integrating that feedback, showing you're open to it, and I guess just putting yourself out there, just like button up your resume, button up your portfolio, start applying and see what you get. And then if you want to be tested a little bit, maybe change some words around if you're not having good luck with getting interviews back. Just like try to ask your mentor or your buddy, like, where do you think the gaps are? Oh, I see another question from Julie. I have a lot of the product designer experience in business strategy, project management, and have gotten into design this year. Well, it is just a positive thing to have that kind of experience. I'm not really sure if you are currently designing or want to get a design role, but I do think that when you start building out those projects or doing some of the design work in your current role as a project manager or doing business strategy, it's a good way to preface your case studies by saying, I brought not just the design skill set, but all of these other skill sets to it as well. I think in an interview, it will be important for you to distinguish between your focus on design and all of your other skills and how they may impede you from becoming a good designer. So business strategy or project management can sometimes be perceived as this person's not going to go broad on solutions because they're very focused on execution. And so you have to be very mindful of saying, I understand the business constraints, but that will not stop me from going crazy with my design process and then coming back and figuring out whether it's doable. I'm a mechanical engineer. How much of the design portfolio is detailed to where you can't share proprietary information? That's a really good question. So I ran into a little bit of this at my first role at Mint. It's okay to have a password. Just provide a little bit of an overview and make sure you share the password with your application, as opposed to waiting for the company to reach out to you for that password as they're doing the portfolio review process. Just because that step moves really fast and there's a lot of applicants, you want to provide as much information upfront to the reviewer when they're spending time on your application. And if for whatever reason they get stuck, they may reach out to you for the password, but they're also looking at other portfolios that are readily available for them. Awesome. On that note, so like I said, everything's on my website. There is my email is readily available. If you have any questions, feel free to sign up for that waitlist as well, or take a look at the specific guides. I also write some of this on Medium if you want to take a look. But thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And it was wonderful meeting y'all today.